Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel recently held its Limit 1 festival, an event where all cards in the game that were not already forbidden from standard play were restricted to one copy per deck. Of course, like all events in Master Duel, the Limit 1 festival also had an additional event-exclusive ban list made to address cards that may be considered too oppressive under the restricted environment of the event in question. I wanted to take a closer look at this ban list because I feel that it is reflective of some problems present not only in Master Duel standard play, but also the two physical formats. First off, let's take a look at probably the biggest offenders: Union Carrier, True King VFD, Prishkran Hauki Fibrax, and Predaplant Verte Anaconda. These four cards are the most noteworthy on the list because all four of them have already been forbidden in the physical game. VFD and Verte are banned in both formats, while Union Carrier is banned in the TCG, and as of July 1st, 2022, Hulk is now banned in the OCG after being limited since January 2019. Hulk has also recently received a limit in the TCG, which may indicate that it's soon to follow in the footsteps of the other three. With the exception of Union Carrier, all of these cards are currently already limited in Master Duel, whose standard restriction list is roughly based on the July 2021 OCG list. As such, the Master Duel Balance team's decision to disallow these cards in the Limit 1 festival suggests that they're aware that a player not having access to multiple copies of these cards doesn't actually change the impact they have on the game. This highlights one of the greater issues with the way the physical game often handles restricting powerful cards, extra deck monsters in particular. It also shines a light on a particularly questionable trend in card design that has become characteristic of cards from the Link Vrains packs, in that the value one gains from resolving one of these cards is often so high that you win the game on the spot. Conversely, having these high value cards interrupted is often so detrimental that you likely won't actually survive the opponent's turn to use an additional copy if you had access to them anyway, effectively making a limit worthless. Speaking of Link Vrains pack monsters, Isolde Two Tails of the Noble Knights is often used in a manner similar to, and oftentimes in conjunction with, Hauki Fibrax. However, what sets Isolde, Gossip Shadow, and Fusion Destiny apart from the first group is that these cards are what one would consider enablers, rather than actual problems in their own right. That's not to say that these cards aren't strong or even arguably poorly designed in their own ways, but rather that the issues with them are almost always a direct consequence of being attached to a different card that they're used as a stepping stone for. In fact, these three cards almost directly parallel the first group. Gossip Shadow is used in conjunction with Rango Miniad to create a lockdown similar to VFD and Union Carrier. Isolde is a Link 2 that kickstarts plays by summoning a monster from the deck and has a conditional secondary effect like Hulk, and Fusion Destiny is actually the card that you most often see Verte sending to cheat out a boss monster. These cards are essentially like a prototype phase of the first group, where they're mostly innocent outside of one specific use case, but can easily become detrimental to the overall health of the game if they were to gain a wider range of things to abuse. Next up on the list are what could be considered to be the big three floodgates in the game: Skill Drain, Imperial Order, and Vanity's Emptiness. All three of these cards have been on the ban list in both physical formats in some capacity. Vanity's Emptiness has been limited in both the TCG and OCG since April 2015, becoming forbidden in March 2017 and July 2022 respectively. Imperial Order was banned since 2004, before receiving an erratum and unbanned in both formats at the start of the Link era, before finally seeing a ban once again in both formats in 2022. Perhaps most contentiously, Skill Drain was limited in the TCG alongside Vanity in 2015, before becoming unlimited again in 2022, despite players of all three formats calling for it to be banned instead. The floodgates are in sort of a weird middle ground between the two groups of extra deck monsters discussed earlier. where there are some legitimate use cases for them in enabling alternative playstyles, but in practice they are generally just resolve and win the game cards. This is especially true of Imperial Order, which specifically prevents players from using the primary method of removing floodgates to begin with, removal spell cards such as Harpy's Feather Duster and Lightning Storm, and draw cards like the Pots to dig for them. The true strength of floodgates, however, comes from both their ability to be run alongside one another, and the ability of decks that run them to essentially do so interchangeably. As you can see in the replay currently playing, True Draco is undeterred by the absence of the big 3 floodgates, as it can freely run the plethora of others available to it, and even has access to an upgrade of skill drain that only affects the opponent. This is likely the reason why Dynamite Knight, the True Draco fighter, was also forbidden in this event. Whereas limiting extra deck monsters is generally ineffective due to how they can be accessed on demand, Dynamite represents a slightly different issue for main deck cards. Limiting a card is meaningless when there are other unlimited cards that can easily search the card in question. Dynamite has actually been limited in both physical formats and even briefly banned in the TCG for expressly this reason, as any copies of him that you can play in your deck are functionally extra copies of True King's Return, which was also limited. This isn't even the only instance of this problem in True Draco specifically, as the card Terraforming was also limited to properly ensure the deck had reduced access to the limited Dragonic Diagram. The restrictions on both Dynamite and Return have since been eased, with both being unlimited in the OCG and Master Duel, but the ease at which one can pick up True Draco and ruin someone's day has been a continual pain in the side for Master Duel's festivals, and the Dynamite hit was more than likely focused on deterring people from playing it, rather than in the interest of any actual balance. Not that that actually worked. The last card on this list, number 1 Numeron Gate ACOM, is more or less in the same boat. The Numeron OTK is extremely simple to do, but without all 4 gates requires limiter removal to actually pull off, which of course you're not as likely to draw into in the Limit 1 festival. Banning ACOM specifically also cuts off the deck's failsafe of Numeron Chaos Gate Shunya to eke out that bit of extra damage. Once again, this was more of a deterrent than in the interest of actual balance, though the Numeron OTK is rather annoying to deal with in a best of 1 ladder format. So what does this all mean for Master Duel's standard play in the long run? Probably nothing. In fact, with a lot of the cards on this list having cut-in animations, it seems unlikely that these cards will be addressed at all, else the team's efforts making them go to waste. It also appears that, at least for the time being, they're unwilling to truly hit high rarity cards, as the game's first Banlist update in April only had a total of 3 SR cards hit, and no URs. But at the very least, it seems that they're aware of some problems the players have complained about, and who knows what we'll see in the future. Only time will tell.